Okay, I just want you to kind of get in your relaxed state here, and you're relaxing and you're open to your thoughts and not closed-minded and not obsessing. And I'm going to throw a word out there, and I want to see if you get happy or if you get a little blood pressure rise. Okay, here's the word: responsibility. Responsibility. How does that word strike you? How does that word strike you? It is one of the most liberating, powerful, freedom giving, opportunity making success drivers that exist. It is like fuel for getting better. If we have a love affair with responsibility, because basically what responsibility equals in a very certain existential way is freedom. And we'll get into that in a second. But the reason it's so enhancing, if I have responsibility for something, that means that I've got control of it, that I'm taking control of something. And if I'm taking control, guess what? Nobody else can do it for me. It's my responsibility. It means nobody else can do it for me. Well, that also means, and nobody can keep me from doing it either. Or they can't take control of me and guide my life where they want it. If I'm owning the responsibility of myself, then that gives me a lot of freedom in some really key areas that are important to life. And we'll go into those in a second. But if we have a burdensome, fearful, negative, or toxic view of responsibilities. Now, granted, it's easy to do that on the face of it because it means I got to do something. I got to get out of bed and do something. But oftentimes, the word gets killed in people because they've had the message of responsibility put down on them in a toxic way, in an abusive way. You're not living up to your responsibilities. And they also see responsibility as a duty that they kind of have to do. And if they weren't doing it, if they didn't have to, they wouldn't be doing it. And so it becomes externally kind of, driven. And that gets into a lot of, gosh, I wish I didn't have so much responsibility. Well, a lot of that responsibility it's toxic in the way that we're experiencing. And it feels like a duty. It feels like I have to. And I want you to get the have to out of responsibility and get to the choose to, because it's going to open up a lot of worlds for you. Now, here's the bottom line, and this will really give us the wake up call. Okay. If we're thinking about, I have to do this, or I don't have to do that, we miss the point, because if it's true that we're responsible, we will be held existentially responsible in that we will feel the effects of how we take responsibility for it or not. Because reality holds us responsible. That's why a lot of times in boundaries, sometimes people won't live up to their responsibilities in love. And you have to set a limit. Why? Not to make them responsible in terms of that they will obey. What a boundary does is it clarifies they're already responsible, and they will existentially learn that through the consequences that reality is already saying they're responsible for, but we've been enabling them out of experiencing those by codependent behavior or lack of boundaries or people pleasing or whatever it is. One of my favorite verses, and it sounds negative, but it is so positive as well, is whatever somebody sows, that they shall always reap, always also reap. That's responsibility. That's not like you get some warning in the mail. It's like if we plant a seed in the ground existentially and we take the responsibility of watering it and tilling it and all that kind of stuff, we're going to reap an ear of corn. Okay. If we don't, there's no corn. Or if we get drunk and fall on it and crush it, there's no corn. The results hold us responsible, whether we're taking it, obeying that duty or not. Responsibility is built into the very fabric of existence. That's why the existential philosophers actually started a lot of talk about existential responsibility. And I have to ask my in-house philosopher, Albie, who said this. I think of this quote all the time. Was it Camus, maybe, or Kafka, that said, I went out into the night sky, looked at the universe and said, I exist. To which the universe replied, and that evokes no sense of responsibility in me. That's your life, not mine. Well, if you're a person of faith, then there's something that doesn't quite feel right about that, because God has a lot of Stephen Crane was the one who said that. Okay. But, we know that God does respond to our existence, and he does take some responsibilities in our existence, but he also created us. So see, you can't just equate it one-to-one. God certainly puts the arms of ownership over what he has created, but then he did something really weird. He delegated responsibility within that of our circle of domain to us. If you don't think that we have existential responsibility, go back to the story of creation. And God said he made us in his image, which means likeness, which means basically we are like him, that we can create and take ownership and execute responsibility and sowing and building things. And then he went further to show the existential reality of that. And he said, it's yours. Now, not like I'm not going to help or be involved or do my part. What he did was he carved out roles. So he said, I'm going to be the God of this creation, but I'm delegating to you the stewardship of this creation. And we're going to have very different roles. I'm going to be omnipotent, all power. You're going to be potent. You have power. It's just without the omnis. Your power is limited to what you can do yourself. And if you use your self-power to overreach and oppress people with that power, I'm going to call foul. And I'm going to step up at some point, and you're going to feel the consequences of that, because that's not your domain of responsibility. But I tell you what is your domain, he said. You go take ownership of this thing and use all the talents and gifts I've given you to do it well. Well, if we had done that, we would be doing better than we are. But we decided, no, we're going to go omni. I'm not going to be potent. I'm going to be omnipotent. I'm going to do it without God. I'm just not going to be omniscient, know things. I'm going to be omniscient. And I'm going to think I know enough to run this place without the one who ultimately knows how to run it and listen to him. And we're going to even further our omnis by saying, I'm not just present in my skin, in my life. I'm going to be omnipresent, and I'm going to reach over and control other people. No, 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 no. We're going to find out they're going to read boundaries and set a limit, and you're going to be stuck with the consequences of being frustrated because you're trying to control the other person. But see, responsibility is built into the thing. So let's close this by, let me give you a little list of things that life can be enhanced when we take responsibility for them. Now, I'm going to start this out in case you have been victimized by saying one thing that's true. We can be not at fault or responsible for the way another person acts or does something that inflicts great pain upon us. We didn't cause that. I'm not responsible for that action. I didn't cause or be at fault for being hurt by them. Okay. No victim blaming here at all. But example I use sometimes is if I walk out across the street, I'm doing nothing wrong, and a drunk driver runs a red light and hits me. I'm not responsible for that action. I didn't do anything wrong. It's not my fault. I do have a broken leg. Now, legally, the justice system will step in and divide up and draw the line and say, he's not at fault, the driver's at fault. You will pay damages. Okay. But let's get inside of my existence. Even though they've paid for it, now I've got a broken leg. They might pay the hospital bill. It's my leg, though. And unfortunately, I've got to take the responsibility of going to physical therapy, dealing with my pain, all that kind of stuff, and working through what I'm not at fault for. And if you come from maybe a background where you've been abandoned or you've been abused or you've been hurt, you didn't cause that. That's not your fault. Many times victims, because we're so screwed up in our sense of responsibility, sometimes they'll blame themselves. And they didn't do anything. A lot of times victims feel bad. And that's just part of the screw up of our fall, the fall of mankind, where our boundaries are all confused. You're not responsible for that. You didn't cause that. But what a good shrink will tell you when we sit down to recover from that, we have to take ownership of our feelings and our anxieties and the woundedness and all that, not fault, control. And I need to say, I've been left with this, and now I can be empowered. I am free to be able to put in what I can put in to getting well. That's growth. And I used to put somebody in a hospital for depression. Most times they didn't cause what was making them depressed. But the next morning, I always say, it's going to be a knock at the door about 7 o'clock, and it's Nurse Ratchet, and she's saying, come on, you got to go to group. See, now they've got to take responsibility for doing the things that they need to do to get better. They got to go to group. They got to open up. They got to start to talk. They got to learn some things. They got to make some choices. They got to build some skills and a bunch of different stuff to participate in our healing or the growth of a business or the growth of a life. And a lot of people don't want to do that. One of my favorite passages I just happened to be reading this morning. It says in Proverbs, it says, I went through, I drove past the field, I'm paraphrasing, but I drove past the field of a sluggard, and it was basically overcome with weeds and nothing was growing and this, that, and the other. And he goes on to describe the existential responsibility of that field. And whether or not you're taking responsibility, reality holds us responsible. The pain will hold us responsible. And talked about their hunger kind of starts to tell them, you got to do something about this. And Then it goes on to say, a little sleep, a little slumber, and poverty will come upon you. If we don't get up to go to work, we get fired. No, I don't have a paycheck. Now, I'm not talking about people that are oppressed and in poverty, because we should be responsible to them to help them as well. And we should be givers. I hope everybody listening to this is involved in some way in helping somebody that has less than you do. And I don't mean just less, I mean people that have need. And we've really gotten that equation screwed up in a lot of ways. Sometimes because somebody has more than me, we get into this whole, well, I'm entitled to what you have just because I exist. No, 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 you're not. People have a lot of different stuff. Height, brains, IQ, as well as opportunities and all that. But we do have the responsibility to the oppressed and to the powerless and to the wounded. And in that relationship, when we are helping, sometimes we have to help them understand what their side of the equation is. Like the depressed person who's got to go to group, and you didn't cause this, but I need you to participate in your healing so we can get better. I mean, even infants who have sometimes, difficulty nursing, for example, and they'll work to stimulate them to come on. You got to work here. She's here. The milk is here. We got to get you going here, and we all have to participate at some level. So responsibility is a good word. So look around, and I'm gonna give you a list. In your feelings, how you feel, what responsibility or ownership do you need to take of those feelings in order to begin to change how you feel? Your attitudes, your behaviors, your choices, your limits and boundaries, your values. You might take some ownership of your values. Your values aren't producing the results because reality is holding you accountable for those, right? And your talents and your thinking and your desires. Sometimes we have desires, and we need to take responsibility for those, because they might get us in trouble. I mean, as I'm sharing with you, I'm down this after, being inactive with my surgeries for so long. I got fat, and I'm, losing weight now. At lunch today, I've got desires for stuff that I'll be held existentially responsible for. So we have to take responsibility for our desires. And there's a lot of stuff on that menu I really desired, but I had to take responsibility because I will be held responsible for that, because it will show up somewhere I don't want to show up, probably tomorrow. So, yeah, had a light lunch. Anyway, you get the idea. So, what in life do we say, I might not have caused this, but I need to own it, that here's where we are, and here's where I am, and what do I need to put my arms around, take control of to begin to change this? All righty, a little bit there on responsibility.